and glasses on the side if anyone needs to have a drink during the meeting. Could I ask if anyone present, both members, officers and members of the public, if you've got a mobile phone, can you please make sure you've set it to silent or turned it off just so it doesn't interrupt the proceedings. And I'd normally ask at this point if anyone wants to video the meeting. Well, as you're aware, we are being videoed today, so just so that everyone is aware of that. The protocol basically is that the camera can be set up in one location and it will film from there. It won't be moving around during the meeting, so hopefully no one will feel they are distracted when they're doing their speaking. I think at this point it's useful so you know who's in front of you today, so I'm going to ask the various members and officers just to introduce themselves. So if we start from the end, Councillor Glasswood, do you want to just say who you are?
Alec Glasswood. Alec Glasswood, District Councillor for Fairfax Ward.
Tony Grimes, Deputy Chairman of DM Section 1.
Sam Bogfilmer, Chairman of the Planning Committee.
Leyla Nicholson, Committee Manager.
Dawn Lehman, Legal Advisor to the panel.
Jeanette Burton, Landscape Officer.
Sharon May, Senior Business Support Officer.
Thank you very much. Basically, just to let you know the procedures that we'll follow today. What will happen is our landscape officer will give us the background to this particular group of trees, what's in front of us today, and the recommendation that is being made. Once that has been concluded, the panel and the legal officer are at liberty, if they wish to ask any questions, just if there's anything they feel they need to clarify. We'll then ask for supporters or objectors to come forward, each one in turn. I've got a running order, which basically is, as I understand it, is the order in which people register to speak. So we'll call you forward to the Speaker's chair. You will see that you've got the 3-minute timer, which will indicate how much time you've got left to address the panel. Again, at the end of your comments, if there are any points of clarification that the panel feel they need to ask, or the legal officer, then we will. But we're not going to. It's not going to be an interrogation, so don't worry. Once that has happened, we'll then ask if the landscape officer wishes to come back with a summary of where they are after they've heard all the comments and questions from all the speakers. If there's anything you want to add, then again that's something we'll then take. And again, members can ask you any queries or points of clarification. And again, the same thing for the supporters and objectors. We'll ask you to come forward if there's something you want to feel that you need to just draw attention again to. But it won't obviously be a long point of that. It's just really to pick up on anything that you feel that we need to. At which point, the panel will then make their own comments and have a discussion as to whether there are things that they feel that they wish to decide on, and at that point they will need to make a decision as to whether to confirm the order or not. So hopefully that gives you an outline of basically the format that we're going to follow this afternoon. It will become clearer as we work through it. It sounds very complicated, but it's hopefully pretty straightforward. So if we make a start, and Ms. Burton, would you like to just give us the background of this particular situation that we have before us today on the panel?
Thank you, Chairman. Today we're going to consider 5 representations for the serving of the order and objections received from 6 members of the public. Prior to the serving of the order, I was called out to Coronation Road to have a discussion about the trees with local residents. And we had quite a lengthy debate with quite a few people who were concerned about the condition of the trees, and they raised all sorts of items like, the health and safety aspects and other things like the debris that is falling off the trees into the road and around, and the impact also on the adjacent garages, and that's explained further on in the report. So making the TPO, I obviously undertook an assessment of the trees prior to making the TPO. The local planning authority can make a tree preservation order if it appears to them to be expedient in the interest of amenity, to make provision for the preservation of trees or woodlands in their area. Orders should be used to protect they're not protected for their individual merit. And basically what I was looking at is whether their removal would have a significant impact on the environment. So authorities are advised to develop ways of assessing the amenity value of trees, and you have to do it in a structured and consistent way. So we use a methodology, a standard methodology, every time we assess trees for TPO. And that will be explained as I go along. So the first criteria when you're assessing to see whether trees are important in terms of their visual amenity is they need to be visible from a public place. And you know, members have already been out and had a look at trees, and you know they're very apparent. You know, it's Coronation Road. So they meet that criteria. Public visibility alone will not be sufficient to warrant an order. The authority is advised to assess the particular importance of an individual tree and of groups of trees by reference to its characteristics. And these include their size and form, their future potential as an amenity, their rarity, cultural or historic value, their contribution to and relationship with the landscape, and contribution to the character or appearance of a conservation area. Now this area isn't a conservation area, so he didn't score on that. And you know, the trees have been there for some time. It's quite evident that, you know, they've probably been there 100 years. You know, they were probably planted as a hedge actually, is my view, you know, to provide a boundary along that road, and they've grown up as trees because they haven't been maintained. I wouldn't say that they're rare trees, they're not a rare species. Beech is quite a common tree, common native tree. You know, and because they haven't been maintained, they have achieved quite a size, so they scored quite highly in terms of their size, you know, as a group. And when you're assessing the size, you're required to do a calculation of the volume of the canopy, the size of the canopy as you look at it in the street scene. So you estimate its width and its height, and then you score it accordingly. So that was done. So we then have to say, well, is it expedient to make an order? And in this case, when I'd been out prior to the order to meet the local residents who'd raised concerns, some people were saying, yes, the tree should be retained, and some people were saying, we want them gone because they're a nuisance. So the trees were at risk, potentially, of being removed. So basically, did the assessment, and you will see that I did a scoring. The scoring came to 15, which merits consideration for TPO. 15 and above merits consideration for a TPO. So it's taken all those criteria into account. So we served the order, and in serving the order, then everybody is given a chance to make representations, either in favour or against the order. And we gave the statutory time period of 6 weeks, I think it is, for anybody to make representations, and hence we're here today to listen to those. So, you know, when I looked at them, you know, I thought, well, you know, they're not in great shape, some of them. But you can see that they've had some pruning in the past. But what I was careful to consider was, you know, are they currently in a dangerous condition? Now, you can never guarantee that a tree isn't going to drop a limb. You know, we get difficult weather conditions, you know, but I didn't consider that they were imminently going to fail. And I felt that they were, you know, in fair condition, I suppose. So, you know, I wasn't concerned. If they'd been in very poor condition, they wouldn't have met the criteria for even serving the order. I also got my colleague from Clean Surroundings to have a look at them. He's a qualified arboricultural technician, and he actually came to site with me when we met the residents originally, and he didn't consider that the trees were dangerous either. And also prior to that, Ben Coles from the County Council, he's the county arborist. He'd looked at the trees previously, and he didn't think they were dangerous. So three experts have all had a look at them, but you know, none of us can give a guarantee that in a high wind or heavy snowfall or something like that, the trees, there may be branch fracture, but you know, that's just the course of events. In terms of around the base of the trees, when you're assessing whether a tree is safe or not, you also look around the base of the tree to see if there's any root heave. Now, it was noted that the paving had lifted due to root encroachment, but it wasn't so significant that, you know, I felt that the tree was going to fail at the root. So, you know, in terms of health and safety, I think I'd covered all bases really. So, the order was served, and then obviously we had representations. You know, obviously there's quite a lot of people, as you will see from the appendices, that have either written in and stated their reasons, and there's also been a petition as well from local people of 101 signatures in favour of retaining the trees and confirming the order. So, would you like me to go through the reasons for protection? I mean, it's all in the report, but I'm happy to just quickly go through them so that everybody knows. So, the reasons for protection include the fact that the trees have taken a long time to grow and are so valuable to our environment, and it would be a crime to kill them. Each and every tree is valuable in our dying world, and only by preserving and planting at each and every opportunity are we going to have any chance of winning our battle with climate change. The beauty and psychological benefits that these trees bring is invaluable. The trees are at least 150 years old and have been there for generations to enjoy, as well as being a habitat for local wildlife. The trees not only provide vital oxygen for us to breathe and offset harmful byproducts of fossil fuel burning, but are also home to a wide variety of insects, birds and mammals. Sedgemoor has declared a climate emergency. The trees should be preserved in line with both that and the local biodiversity action plan. The trees moderate the effects of sun and wind, and they clean the air by trapping dust, pollen and other pollutants. Trees increase property value and make people feel good. Workers are more productive when they see trees along their commute route and their windows. Landscapes that include trees help relaxation, lower heart rates and reduce stress. Trees are precious and really improve the air in built-up areas. The trees provide a habitat for bats, insects, squirrels and birds. They instill a sense of calm and beauty in the road. Despite branches being pulled off the trees, they remain healthy and strong. And again, she's noted that Ben Coles, the tree expert from the county, has confirmed the trees are healthy. The trees help to screen the adjacent garages and add value to the property prices in Coronation Road. And they soften the vista of other constructions along the road. Trees mop a tremendous amount of water and reduce flooding. Trees can reduce flooding of up to 25% and can mop up 11,000 gallons of water and release it into the air as oxygen and water vapour in a single growing season. The trees are much loved locally, and this is evidenced by the petition with 101 signatures. Given the amenity value of the grace and beauty of the trees, their oxygen production, flood reduction and screening abilities, plus their value to wildlife, trees should be permanently protected. works for the community, the wildlife and the wider ecosystem. This submission also included a comparison to the council's evaluation assessment, and that scored 30, which was minded, but okay. So the grounds for objection are then considered from the 6 local residents who submitted representations. And their grounds included the following. The group of 4 beech trees compromise the safe use of the adjacent footway and road. More specifically, the tree root heave of the footway exceeds the safe limits as suggested in Somerset County Council's Highway Safety Inspection Manual of 2013 revision 1.3. Canopy debris reduces rainwater runoff via gutters and drains. In adverse weather conditions, canopy debris renders the road surface more susceptible to skidding. Railways also suffer with similar problems. The objection's wife is registered disabled. Using the back entrance to the property is necessary, and the debris from the trees make the walkway slippery and dangerous. The garden also suffers from serious light pollution. The trees are not in perfect condition and therefore not worthy of a tree preservation order. 4 beech trees were planted a long time ago when there were no houses, and certainly it was not a residential street. They have been an issue for many years, and during this time they have continued to get bigger and bigger. The trees have had no maintenance over the years, and they block out morning sunlight to the properties on the western side of Coronation Road. If a tree preservation order is put on the trees, there will never be a chance or opportunity for them to be cut down or reduced to a manageable size. The shading caused by the trees necessitates the need for lights to be put on in the adjacent properties during the summertime. Concern is raised about the amount of leaves, sap and beech nuts. These cause a real nuisance both in the road and pavement, and sap is sticky on the cars. Trees cause the area to be very dark, and in the past there have been burglaries in the adjacent garages. Large branches are a concern and could cause damage if there is a storm. Several branches are already fractured due to the inclement weather. Elderly residents are concerned they may slip on the leaves or are hit by falling branches. The trees are located in the wrong area, and this species should be located in parks. The trees are too big, and a TPO will mean they will only get bigger and no longer suitable for Coronation Road. There are already plenty of trees to enjoy in the area, e.g. the Quantock Hills and many trees within the town. The trees overhang the road considerably and are hit constantly, causing twigs to break off. The evidence can be seen in a pile behind the 4 trees. Concern is raised regarding root encroachment affecting neighbouring property and underground services. The persons who planted the trees are long departed and left local residents in this present situation, i.e. to maintain the trees and deal with any damage that is caused. The trees are becoming dangerous with branches falling off onto the adjacent garage roof and possibly injuring a person. View when reversing out of the garage is obstructed by the trees. Discussions with the council prior to the serving of the order, and it is felt the TPO have been put in place to stop the trees from being made safe. There is no regular maintenance of the trees, and they should be got rid of completely. When the leaves fall, they are never cleared, and on occasion this has resulted in blocked drains. So those are the 4 in favour and against. So in response to the, I have then responded to the grounds of objection, and I noted that the roots of the beech trees have caused lifting of the pavement, and that this does cause a health and safety problem. As the trees are located on unregistered land and ownership is unknown, repairs to the area beneath the trees have not to date been carried out. Whilst I accept that the adjacent pavement is substandard, this matter could be resolved by undertaking remedial works to relay the footpath and retain the trees. The matter of who would take responsibility for these works would, however, have to be resolved. I also noted that debris, leaf litter and twig branch loss from the trees is causing an issue for the disabled and elderly, and it is considered, I don't argue that it's a health and safety issue. The debris shred from the trees is in fact a natural phenomenon, and although cannot be completely resolved, could be addressed by carrying out maintenance to both the trees and the area beneath. Any remedial works in respect of pruding, however, would require consent under the TPO regulations by way of an application to the council should this order be confirmed. The trees don't have to be in perfect condition to meet the criteria for a TPO. I mean, no tree is in perfect condition. It is noted that trees were planted a long time ago before this area became a residential street, and they have had little or no maintenance over the years. They are, however, well established, and their canopies overhang the road and adjacent garages. The issue of lower branches of an adjacent protected beech tree, which is the individual tree to the north of the group, you know, we discussed that when we were out on site initially, and an application was put in. We helped with an application. My colleague Chris from Cleans Around has submitted an application on behalf of, you know, on behalf of the gentleman who was affected by it, and you know, it went through the process and consent was granted to crown lift that tree to alleviate the problem. So we've talked to Somerset County Council about crown lifting the trees, and they confirm that they don't consider that the canopy of the trees are an issue at this time in respect of high-sided vehicles, and this has been confirmed by the highways, the waste recycling people. You know, because if the trees, sorry, if the trees became an obstruction to the highways authority would issue a notice to get the trees cut back. Now, who they'd issue it to, that's a difficult one because nobody owns them, do they? Anyway, moving on. Whilst it's noted that residents of the property located on the western side of Coronation Road have raised objections regarding the shading to their properties, crown lifting may improve to a degree the shading issue. Because the trees aren't that close to the properties across the road, but you know, I do accept that in the summertime they're going to cast some shade. So finally, not finally, but going on, no evidence has been submitted to suggest that the trees are causing structural damage to the property. I have noted that debris from the trees are causing occasional blocked drains and gutters. Maintenance of the gutters and drains would again resolve this issue. However, responsibility for this would need to be determined. The sticky sap that is an issue with parked cars in the vicinity of the trees is a common problem which is caused by aphid infestation. It's not the trees themselves that exude the sticky residue, it is actually the insects on the leaves that cause the problem. But the trouble is you can't really spray a whole tree to get rid of the insects. It's a bit of a difficult one, really. So we've, you know, I've inspected the trees and the arbor technician has had a look at them. Despite there being evidence of minor branch loss, there was no evidence at the time of the inspection to suggest that the trees were in dangerous condition. It is noted that trees cause an obstruction to visibility when vehicle traffic reverses out from the garages. This matter could be improved by reversing the car into the garage so that the driver can see pedestrians by using the pavement, and also improve visibility of passing cars on Coronation Road, if that's possible. The trees have not had any regular maintenance in recent years, and I accept that. The trees are located on unregistered land, as I've already said, and ownership, despite extensive investigations. We've been to land registry, you know, we've asked people, nobody's come forward. The site notice on the trees, nobody's come forward and said, you know, they're my trees. You know, so unless somebody pops up now, then I don't think we're ever going to find out who those trees belong to. So that's something that is not going to get resolved. Now, if the trees became dangerous at some point in the future, there is the Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, which allows the council to undertake works to trees that nobody is responsible for. And what happens is we would do the work to make the trees safe, and then we would put a charge on the property and reclaim. If we found out if they came forward, then we'd say, yeah, oh, they're your trees. Oh, by the way, you owe us for this work. So that's we've done that a couple of times, not recently, but it has happened in the past. So finally, to conclude, confirming the order would guarantee the retention of this group of 4 beech trees. Any subsequent surgery would have to go through the process of making an application and consent granted, and that would be granted subject to conditions that the works were carried out to the British standard within 2 years of the consent, and also when we grant consent, you know, we also put a condition on that any works don't affect birds nesting and bats and whatever, because we want people to be compliant with the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 Part 1. So we will basically control any works to that tree, to the trees, and how it's carried out. And I think that is my report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members of the panel and Mr. Lehman, are there any questions that you've got for Mrs. Burton at this point?
There's one question.
Could you put your mic on?
Oh, sorry. In terms of leaf debris, is there any maintenance regime carried out by either the district or the county council in terms of road sweeping?
Myself, I'm not aware that they regularly clean the streets, but I think, you know, clean surroundings, you know, if we contacted them and they thought it was an issue, that then, you know, they would send the road sweeper up there. But the problem is, in this situation, is it's probably not the road that's the issue, it's the area beneath the trees that nobody wants to take responsibility for because it's unregistered. So that's where the difficulty arises here, is that, you know, if there was a landowner, they owe a duty of care to anybody. You know, they're responsible for their land, and they would be required to clean it up and make it safe in terms of pedestrians and whatever.
Thank you. Councillor Glassford?
Thank you, Chairman. Mrs. Horton, I think you said at the beginning of your presentation, what brought your notice to these 4 trees?
I've been aware of these trees for a long time. I mean, the first tree, which is that we haven't talked about today, is you probably noticed it when you went out to site, is the individual tree that was protected on its own individual merit. Now, you know, I did notice that at that time I did notice there were 4 other trees, but, you know, I didn't think that they were really under threat at that time. So they weren't, I didn't include them because I felt that, you know, the threat wasn't there at the time. But then local residents contacted me because they'd heard their neighbours weren't happy with the trees in terms of how they were being, well, the lack of maintenance really, and all the issues that you've heard today. So that's how I heard really, and then so I thought, well, I'll try and resolve it by going out on site and having a meeting. But unfortunately, although we had a lengthy meeting, we couldn't resolve the issues. There were so many issues, you know, it couldn't be resolved. And then, you know, there was then even more pressure to revisit it and score it out again and have a look in fine detail at all the fors and against and score it out, you know, and it made it, you know, in my opinion, it made it scored 15, so I had to consider it, and so that's why the order was served.
Thank you.
Councillor Grimes?
Thanks, Chairman. This is very difficult. I think the report is very comprehensive. And also, there is valid arguments on both sides to this. Couple of things, questions. The trees in question, do they take any water from the single tree? Could they do any damage to that single tree by being there?
Well, they're all
That's my first
competing
question.
against each other, you know, I mean, particularly the ones that have been planted so close together, you know, when you look at them, you can tell that their roots will be intermingled, and the roots will be intermingled with the one to the north, the individual one. So they all have a water demand, so they will all be sucking up moisture from the ground, and you know, where those roots are will be difficult to tell you where they are unless you did some trial holes, you know. So it's difficult, but they will compete against each other, yes.
And the other thing really is, I'm a bit concerned because nobody seems to know who owns this land. And if nobody does anything, these trees are going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's going to be an eventuality where something's going to happen. If it was straightforward and we knew who was actually responsible, I think that is different. But this is why we're put in an awkward position here, and I can see the arguments
Yeah.
to both sides of it.
It is really difficult, you know. I think trying to resolve the issues that are here in this report isn't an easy one. Now, you know, it may be decided that, you know, we come to some agreement with local residents, that maybe the council, this is just my suggestion, is maybe the council pays half and local residents pay half to get the site tidied up, footpath repaired and the trees managed appropriately, and leave it at that. I don't know.
I think
That's just my thought. But
I mean,
it's a-
that is my biggest concern, is that nothing's going to happen. The trees are going to get bigger, the pavement's going to lift up even further, and we're going to be back here talking about
Yeah.
these trees in
Yeah.
future.
Well, the thing is, if it starts to lift up the pavement that is county highways, or they start to obstruct the highway, then the county highways department would have justification for taking those trees out, wouldn't they?
If I could just follow up on that one then, in terms of serving the TPO, if those works for either dangerousness or damage to buildings or highway cropped up in the future with or without the TPO, does that make any difference? Because in effect, as I understand it, with a tree preservation order, it would still allow works to be done if they are required.
Yeah. Essential works to trees can be carried out, you know, say if their branch became dangerous, you know, you don't need to put in an application to deal with it, you just deal with it. Any other works, sort of crown reduction works or crown lifting works to let vehicles underneath, you would need to apply for consent. Now then there's going to be the argument about how much works is going to be appropriate. So, you know, now beech trees, they don't prune very well. They don't tolerate heavy pruning really. And, you know, the other trees in the street, the planes, they historically have been pollarded, as has that beech on the end been pollarded. And it obviously was pollarded quite a long time ago, and it responded okay, and it's quite a nicely formed tree, although it is pollarded. But if you went and pollarded it again, you'd probably kill it. So you can only now really start to look at, well, what can I do for those trees in terms of future maintenance, you'd have to look at, you know, well, you're probably only going to be able to remove secondary growth, not major structural limbs, and look at the unions of where they've had branches broken out and regrowths taken place. You're going to only be able to really sort of do surgery to make the trees safe and keep them in a well-balanced form. So, you know, it's going to have to be considered quite carefully, and you're probably not going to resolve the problem of shading or that sort of thing, you see. So it's not going to be easy.
Thank you very much. There's no further questions? Okay. Right. If we move on then from that point, we'll take our speakers. So if I could ask Councillor Pearce, if you'd like to come forward. Afternoon, Councillor Pearce. As you can see, you've got the 3 minutes on the clock, so start when you're ready to go. Thank you.
I'm here as a local ward councillor, but also as a local resident in support of the tree preservation order. I lived in Coronation Road for approximately 13 years, almost opposite these trees, so I do know what it's like to live literally alongside them and know acutely how they divided opinion in the road. I do understand the residents who are angry about the trees, with the risked branches and bits of tree falling onto their properties. As has been said, they are tall, mature trees which have been unadopted and therefore unmanaged, and therein lies the problem. As the report states, branches have been torn off, and should this or unwise pruning take place without the protection of a TPO in the future, I do have concerns that such actions would undermine the safety and stability of the trees. At this point in time, however, the recent assessments have revealed that the trees remain in fair condition and safe, so now would seem to be an ideal time to implement protections to keep them that way. Coronation Road and the surrounding streets are in the main densely built terraced houses with small or no front gardens. The street scene at that end of the road especially is largely dominated by brick and concrete garages, tall walls and houses. The trees therefore provide a welcome visual relief of green to the street scene, and as well as go in some way to absorbing the sound and carbon emissions from the nearby A39, one of the busiest routes in and out of town. Over the years, Bridgwater has lost many trees, one by one, and according to Somerset County Council statistics, tree cover in Bridgwater is currently only 7%, which is below the national average of 13%. A climate emergency has been declared, and Sedgemoor District Council has made a commitment to being carbon neutral by 2030. Trees play an integral part in achieving this, and much energy has been taken by activities such as looking for areas where trees can be planted. Whilst this is hugely important, preserving what we have is also essential. Therefore, in conclusion, I support the TPO as a group amenity, as a means of maintaining and managing these mature specimens, to retain an enhanced street scene, and in the absence of a landowner, demonstrating a duty of care towards local residents and as playing a small part to protecting an urban environment against the effects of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions you have? All right, don't worry. No, I think you're fine. Thank you. And Heritage? See the time on the clock and start whenever you're ready to go. Blue button to turn the microphone on.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's lovely.
I'm registered disabled and have connective tissue illness and asthma. The beech trees provide a great source of oxygen to help with that. During its lifetime, one beech tree provides just under 7,000 kilograms of oxygen. Each tree makes enough oxygen to keep 10 people breathing for a year. The 4 beech trees provide enough oxygen for 40 people yearly, about 2/3 of us in Coronation Road. Due to Hinkley Point traffic, the air pollution along Quantock Road and Coronation Road has increased of late. SDC figures for air quality appear to be 2 years out of date. Particulate levels in air appear to be over the safe limit. Traffic here is producing nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide and heavy metals, all levels exceed World Health Organization limits in my estimation. The World Health Organization says there are 3.7 million premature deaths due to dangerous traffic pollutants in the air in the UK. These particulates penetrate deep into human respiratory systems. I take serious offence that residents from Victoria Road want trees in Coronation Road felled or cut back due to seasonal leaves and beech mast on cars. Residents of Victoria Road choose to park on the unregistered land the trees live on. Often vans are parked across this land and the pavement blocking the footway. Few people walk along there due to parked cars. I'd rather breathe clean air by retaining the trees than ingest traffic fumes. Nearby Morrison's have a fabulous new car wash for sticky cars. The issues of the trees being perceived as dangerous is in variance with the laws of physics. The main trunks and branches are stable. The small branches across the road aren't big enough to cause harm to houses across Coronation Road or kill any pedestrians. The immunity values of the trees is high. As well as producing oxygen, they mop up the floodwater in the road, which has got worse of late, screen ugly gouges behind them, the breeze block wall, chicken wire, and a giant recycling clothespin that's often planted behind 9 Victoria Road. The piles of branches behind the trees are the result of vandalism, not branches falling. The pile is now home to hedgehogs. I've spoken to over 100 residents, mainly from Hazy Road and Provident Place. They appreciate the immunity value of the beech trees and say they enjoy the autumn colours, the shade and the valley's local wildlife. They recognise the trees' part in providing habitat for squirrels, bats, birds and multiple insects who rely on the habitat the beech trees provide. I would ask you to make the TPOs permanent and request a SDC to take on maintenance to allow them to continue to provide immunity value for the area in the healthy condition the County Council confirm they are in, without cutting them too much back to retain their elegant form. I would ask SDC to keep up the maintenance rather than task it to residents in view of past issues with how they have been treated. Trees of this age cannot be pollinated, which would kill them. The TPO point system, in my opinion, was around 30 points, as illustrated.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members at all? No, that's fine. Thank you. Mark Meeker, please. Mark Meeker.
If we couldn't, and putting a TPO on it wouldn't resolve anything, like you said, because we the trees have been there all that long, and if you, nobody knows who owns the land, so we're not gaining nothing from it. But no, I'm just, well, I don't know what to say really, because we want to resolve it, but at the point putting a TPO on it just crushes that really. So I mean that's all I want to say. I mean my feelings are what I put in my letter anyway, so. Okay?
That's fine, thank you. Any questions at all? That's fine. Roy Franklin. Start whenever you're already in, the mic's on already, so.
I would ask the panel to make the TPOs on the beech trees in Coronation Road permanent. The amenity value they provide is as follows. They are an ensemble of mature trees providing a small, much-needed oasis of habitat for wildlife. They are medium-sized trees, healthy and sturdy, with strong vertical branches which are not high enough to reach the houses in Coronation Road should they fall. The small branches which overhang the road are high up enough that they do not cause any issues with the recycling lorries who have confirmed this. In an email they say they cause no issues whatsoever for them. The recycling lorries are the highest vehicles which ever come down the road. The branches that overhang the unregistered land they stand on are much higher than the high-top transit that is parked, and the vehicles that illegally back onto the road and across the pavement, preventing pedestrians from using the walkway. The trees that screen the large recycling bin that is behind 9 Victoria Road where the man who runs the business in the residential area leaves it. Given the length of the gardens in Victoria Road, if something like a hurricane big enough to rip the main branches off the trunk was strong enough to sling it into the back gardens of Victoria Road, then given the back gardens are very long and the branches still would fall nowhere near the houses as their gardens are around 100 foot long. Predictions in one letter of death by tree branch say more about the anxiety levels of residents than the reality of the matter. People with blocked drains and gutters need to do routine maintenance like everyone else, rather than request the felling of healthy trees.
Any questions from members of the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John Watts, please.
Okay. Right, John Watts, 7 Victoria Road. I've been resident at Addergrave since August 1979. Firstly, I will draw your attention to an unsubstantiated and untrue allegation made against me that I have removed limbs from the trees in question and promoted their removal. If these allegations can be substantiated, perhaps the committee would allow proof to be submitted today. In the absence of such proof, the validity of any additional claims from that source should be treated with utmost scepticism. My objection to granting the TPO trees in question is that I believe it would significantly delay or render impractical timely management of the trees. In addition, I believe the schedule of work is inaccurate. The trees have been awarded a value of 1 for suitability. How can a commercial species of tree, 75 feet tall, with a canopy that is standing approximately halfway across the road, be suitable for an urban environment? Secondly, they have been awarded a value of 1 for amenity value. This has not been substantiated or explained. Consequently, I consider the value should be 13, which is below the level required for a TPO. In common in this area, our grade, in addition, reference has been made to the value of wildlife, including squirrels. The only squirrels available in the area are grey ones. That's a non-indigenous and invasive species, and one that it's illegal to sucker. For birds, they afford roosting but not nesting facilities. If you check the trees now, you will see there are no old nests available. Great play has been made on the environmental benefit of these trees. If they are of such value, why is the predominance of trees in the locality birch and or London plane? London plane is far more beneficial to an urban environment. The claim that trees consume vast amounts of water and consequently reduce flooding is more applicable to countryside and uplands retention. Flooding in parts of Coronation Road is due to the annual autumn leaf fall, which also renders the road and footway more dangerous to use. Would the council consider planting beech trees now? If so, should they consider undertaking a planting scheme for both Provident Place and Housley Road, where there is a distinct dearth of trees? There has been considerable reference to ecological benefits. This cannot be disputed. However, there is very little consideration given to the loss of habitat in Whitegates, the adjoining junction at Cannington, and the loss of trees to the High Street. During a discussion with council representatives, they implied that the trees in the High Street have been removed because they were unsuitable. When asked why they were not retained, managed and enhanced with additional planting, no reply was forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Any questions from the Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And Pauline Marlowe, please. And again, start whenever you're ready.
I'm a resident of Coronation Road. I've been there for 26 years, and my house is directly opposite the trees. When we first bought the house, as you can imagine, 26 years ago, the trees were quite considerably smaller and didn't really pose any problem. We just assumed that they belonged to the people who own the garages in Victoria Road. We didn't look into it any further about who the trees belonged to. Over the years, they've got bigger and bigger, as you've seen for yourself, and now are causing more of a problem. And the underlying issue is that they don't actually belong to anybody, and the land doesn't belong to anybody. So therefore, over the 26 years that we've been there, there's been little or no maintenance on those trees when the other trees in the road have been maintained, pollarded, etc. As it is now, they're so big that, and when all the leaves are out, you don't actually get any light in our house at all, or very, very little light. It completely blocks out all the sunlight. So if you go out and you come back in, there's about 4 houses that are actually in full shade. Now I can appreciate all the beauty of the trees and everything like that. I appreciate all that, and all the wildlife, and the birds and everything else. But one is the amount of leaves that they produce in the street, which makes it dangerous. My own mum worries every day that she comes to visit that the leaves are all over the road. And we don't really have enough maintenance from the council there to sweep up all the leaves. The drain outside my house is completely blocked. In fact, I don't actually know where it is now. So that does cause a little bit of flooding. I'm not saying the road is flooded, but you can't actually wash anything away in the road because the drains are all full of leaves and debris and mud and whatever. So that really needs to be looked at. The height of the trees is a worry when it's windy. I know that my husband has said actually the wind blows, it's unlikely they're going to fall on the properties because the wind blows the other way, so they're likely to go crashing into the gardens in Victoria Road, more so than our house. But it is a worry, and it's a worry about if something happens to somebody, whose responsibility is it? That's the bottom line of all this, really. If a TPO is put on, whose responsibility is it for these issues then? Does it mean the council's going to take responsibility for things? That's a worry, that we just want to know what's going to happen. If the TPO's put on, are they going to crown the trees? Are they going to do things with trees? Or is it just going to be on there and everything's just going to be left as it is now, really? That's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would like to ask a question.
If we could just,
Sorry, I would like to
yeah.
ask a question. You said that branches have not actually fallen on your property, it's just a worry, but there's not been any physical damage from your property from the branches.
No, there hasn't.
No. And you also mentioned that there has been some maintenance in the road for street cleaning and cleaning up the leaves. So I'm assuming that you're happy then that some of those leaves have been reduced to a degree where these have been cleaned up.
There is some, the clean surrounds do come out and do the leaves, but not as much as I would like. Whether I need to ask, keep saying, can you come clean the leaves? Can you come clean the leaves? I don't know if you had a look yesterday. We always go out and we always sweep our leaves up, and we do it for the neighbours next door as well because they're a bit elderly further down. Because I don't want them worrying about kind of slipping on the leaves and that. But further down the road, there are a lot of leaves all over the pavement, and it is an issue for elderly people.
And have you seen anybody slip on the leaves?
I've not seen anybody slip on the leaves, but they can be very wet and very dangerous. And in fact, you do, at some points, you do have a job to see any of the pavement, where there are so many leaves all over the pavement, you can't actually see any tarmac. And then if you're going to sweep them into the road, then they're going to block up all the drains and everything else, aren't they? But somebody's going to come along. I can believe the issue is difficult because there's cars in the road, so I can understand from that point of view, but the leaves are an issue.
But the assumption of blockage of drains is an assumption rather than a fact.
No, our drain is blocked outside.
On the
It is
highway?
blocked, yes, on the highway.
Thank you.
If somebody would like to come out and sort that out, that would be really appreciate it. But what I want to know is, would that be done on a more of a regular basis rather than residents having to phone up and say, please can you come out and clean up all the leaves? Because those trees produce a lot of leaves, you know, and they're just getting bigger and bigger, aren't they? And there's more and more leaves, and that's you know, who's going to take responsibility for it all? That's the bottom line of all things, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is that all right then?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Right, if I could ask then, Mrs. Burton, is there any summation that you want to make or any response to any of the issues that have been raised by the other speakers?
Yes, Mr. Watts mentioned about mentioned about the species beech trees. Now, we recently replaced the trees in the high streets to a more suitable species, and we used fastigiate hornbeam, which is quite similar to a beech, very similar to a beech when you look at it. In fact, sometimes when you're identifying it, you can mix them up. Fastigiate trees are more upright. Now, if we confirm this order and the trees had to come out in the future, then, I would be advising on what species would be more appropriate in terms of replacement trees. So if they became dangerous and they had to come out, then, but we'll have control over these replacements. If we don't confirm the order and they're just chopped down, we don't have that control to provide replacements. That's what I wanted to say.
Mr. Chairman, am I allowed to respond to that?
Well, I will be coming back to you in a moment for any comments from the other speakers
Thank you very
at
much.
that stage. So, any other comments or questions for Tony?
Just to confirm that, Jeanette, if we TPO these trees, it would make no difference to organising maintenance of the trees in future or a discussion about joint cost? Could that still be done if these trees were TPO'd?
Yes. The TPO just means that the council will control the
Right.
works.
That's what I want to know, thank you.
Say Barton, yeah. You said that if with the TPO you've got control of what's going to be, what type of tree will replace them. Well, earlier you did actually say that they don't belong to the council. Well, why would we replace trees?
The regulations, the TPO regulations, which statutory, it's under the Town and Country Planning Act, those regulations require that a replacement is planted. Now, regardless of who owns it and who doesn't own it, I mean, somebody's going to have to take on responsibility for these trees in the future. Now, who that may be has not been resolved. But, if you want to take them out, at the moment, because the order's on and it's in effect, you have to make an application to fell. So if somebody said, right, I'm applying to fell, and they could justify the reasons for felling, and they were deemed to be acceptable, then we would grant consent subject to replacement planting. And we would put a condition on specifying the size, maybe the species. Sometimes we agree this, you don't have to put the same species back, you would agree the species with the applicant. And then that would all be agreed in writing prior to it being implemented, and then it would be maintained thereafter.
But we don't know the owner, so who makes the decision?
No, we don't know the owner.
So,
I mean, somebody's going to have to make a decision on who's going to take responsibility here. Now, I've run myself ragged trying to sort this one out, and I've had clean surroundings out. Now, you can understand from their point of view, they have limited budgets, they have all the council's trees to maintain. Now, if they start to maintain trees that they don't own, they're setting a precedent then for anybody coming along saying, nobody owns this tree, will you take it on? Well, they're a bit reluctant to do that unless the trees became dangerous, and then they would deal with them under the Miscellaneous Provisions Act. So that's the situation, really.
So just in terms of trying to get our heads around where we are, with a particular site, we don't know whose trees they are. If there is no TPO in place, then there is still the possibility of the community trying to work out what they want to do. But if there is a TPO in place, the community and the council can still work out what they want to do, but it's under the control of the council because of the TPO.
Yeah. So if in this case, well, so the trees, if you didn't confirm the order, then somebody can decide, right, I've had enough of these trees, I'll get a contractor and I'll get them chopped down. And they would run the risk that the owner would then turn up and say, you've chopped down my trees, you've trespassed on my land, and they could take legal civil action, okay? But once, if you confirm the order, then they would need to apply for consent. So we're in control.
So we're in control of the process, but not responsible for the trees.
No, we have no legal responsibility for the tree. Having a TPO doesn't, it's a bit like having a listed building, you know. If you list a building, then it doesn't mean that English Heritage are responsible for it. So if all your slates blow off, you know, you're not going to English Heritage and saying, I want you to put them all back. You put the listing on. It's.
You're happy that we're in. Right. Okay, Councillor Pearce, is there anything you wanted to come back on? No? And Heritage, anything you wanted to come back on? Do you want to just, if so, we'd like to, sorry, but if you can do the mic so everyone can see it.
I was going to say, I've spoken to the resident of number 9 Victoria Road a while back and said I would be happy to financially contribute to taking some of the growth off. And also I would be happy to contribute and go along with Jeanette's suggestion. Obviously the residents would chip in, you know, as long as it wasn't like a massive amount.
Thank you. Mark Meakin, is there anything you wanted to come back on?
I just want to say, make a point of, somebody did have an accident a couple of years ago, and we slipped over, no lady, right by our tree, obviously it was leaves, and you guys did come out and repair it, but only after I reported it.
Right. Okay.
At that point.
Thank you. Roy Franklin, is there anything you wanted to add? Okay. John Watts?
Yeah. Try not to bore you all too much.
That's all right.
Right. First of all, the comment about the trees in High Street. When we had the meeting on site, a great plate was put on the fact that trees are very precious, and I queried the fact that they had been removed. It was at that time that they suggested they were unsuitable, very similar to the situation we're talking in terms of now. When I asked why weren't they managed and enhanced, that's when there was no reply. Also, the trees that have been replaced are supposed to be like beech trees. Well, I worked in the furniture trade for over 20 years. I can tell you hornbeam is a bitula, which is a birch, not a beech. Perhaps you would like to contemplate that one. Let's start. Again, we're talking in terms of if there is a TPO, that maintenance can be undertaken. What level of maintenance? Because when we had an on-site meeting, the suggestion from the council was that what they would do is clip some of the branches back to allow the passage of the transport underneath, collection lorries. That would have represented possibly 2 or 3 branches on the roadward side. They suggested that they would do the same for the leeward side, if you like. So you would have ended up with 2 or 3 branches on either side of those trees being clipped back. That does not resolve the problem. So again, if a TPO is put on, what level of maintenance is undertaken without having to apply for permission? Finally, and most importantly, at that meeting, and there was quite a few of us from Victoria Road there, we actually put forward the suggestions to the council that if they were prepared to talk this matter through, if need be, the group of us along that road would claim ground, if we could, as long as there was an agreement towards cost and availability of being able to do things without restriction, we could resolve the matter. Nothing has been made reference to that properly, and it wasn't, it's been actually turned down because of what you see today. Final thing, that ground is supposed to be unregistered. Historic precedent tells you that that piece of ground along there was for the delivery of coal to the houses in Victoria Road. I do have a map from Somerset County Council, all very basic, which actually shows that strip of land as a coal delivery yard. It extends, assuming that the map is in scale, it extends to about 10 feet. Nobody, and there was a wall, a retaining wall. nobody's going to plant trees or build a wall with trees on the inside of it. Now, for the sake of the few inspection pits that are there, it could actually be proven whether those trees are on unregistered land or the other side. But with a TPO in place, we won't be able to do that either. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I was just going to ask our legal representative just to clarify the position, because my understanding, I think, is that the TPO doesn't affect anything to do with land ownership or land registry. That would be something that would be dealt with through other matters.
The land registry is a separate code of law. Anybody can make an application to the land registry to ascertain ownership of the land. Where the land is unregistered, that would not be, because it's not registered with the land registry, unregistered land is harder to find the owner. But I mean, you could put notices up, or you could try and do canvassing to try to find the owner of the land. There are other ways to try to find the owner of the land, but with registered land, the land is actually registered at the land registry. In terms of have the land being unregistered in respect of the TPO, anybody can make an application to do works to that tree. So anybody could fund that application to do works for the tree. As Jeanette Burton quite correctly said, usually works to trees would usually require the consent of the owner. As in regards of requiring consent from the owner, that may be more difficult, but then you decide how you wish to do it. You're just at risk that you probably are trespassing against the tree when it belongs to another.
Thank you. Pauline Marlowe, was there anything you wanted to add finally?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify a few points. So, if the TPO is put in place, you said that the council and the community could work together. So, the council would be in control of the process, but not responsible for the trees. So, with the council and the community working together, what would that kind of mean then? Would that mean if we wanted to, for example, take off the lower branches, say, because of the recycling, etc. Does the community have to put an application in for that, or if you feel that some of the higher branches might need to come off? What does that mean by working with the community? Are you going to go ahead and do things? And is there any meetings or notifications for us to know what's kind of going on, or any work on those trees?
What I would say is it's not within the role of this panel to sort out what might happen in terms of the tree, but in terms of the community working together, that would be a question of residents, probably the ward councillors and our officers, talking about what is in effect in the best interest of the community and the tree. And that's the difference, as I understand it. Can I ask you to turn off your mic, because I'm getting feedback.
Oh,
it was, and Jeanette, if you could do, thank you. It's really the TPO means that an application would have to go in to ask for what works needed to be done to the tree, and that will be then assessed as to whether that is in the best interest of the tree or would damage the tree. So the actual sorting out what works are required would be a discussion that would take place outside of that to start with, looking at it with I would imagine the tree surgeon, to work out what is appropriate to be done, but that would be out with this process. We're simply looking at whether the TPO goes in place. I don't know whether, Mr. Burton, whether you want to comment beyond that?
Yeah, we're here to give advice, and, we met you, Chris and I met on site, and we tried to advise as best we could, and, we seemed to get somewhere with the tree on its own, and an application was worked out, and consent has been granted to crown lift that tree and cut the branches back off the garage. But obviously the work hasn't been implemented yet, because there's still well, somebody's got to decide who's going to pay for it, basically. So, you know, we could do the same thing for the, if the order is confirmed, you know, Chris and I could come out, or I could come out on my own and tell you what I think that is in the best interests of the tree, and try and come to an agreement with all parties to resolve the issues, you know. But you know, we tried to resolve them last time, but I mean, I'm quite happy to do that. I mean, that's my role as tree officer, you know. I try and sort of do pre-application discussion so that people aren't putting in an application that they'll never get permission for. It's just a waste of everybody's time. So the answer is yes, I would come out and, you know, try and liaise with everybody. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I can't at that point, but...
Just answer a question that you've asked. I know the answer to something.
Okay, you want to give us an answer from the...
Basically, I've spoken to the land registry. We found out, yes, there was a coal yard there. But what the land registry said, they have no records going back at all of any ownership. But they said what people would have to do is go through everybody's deeds in the area, and it might go back. The other just brief point is on my deeds for my house, which I have, it says I own my house and an area of land nearby, but it doesn't state where. So it could be myself, and I can show that to Jeanette, but it doesn't say that it is that particular thing.
Thank you. Right, members, so I think we've heard obviously a lot of evidence from both views in terms of supporting or objecting to the serving of the TPO. I'm going to come to members just for their comments, and then we will need to make a decision as to what decision we actually make on this application. Councillor Grimes, do you want to go first with just a quick summary of where you think we are?
Yes, like I said, to start off with, I think it's very difficult. The report is very comprehensive, arguments on both sides are very valid. And I think we'll have to make our decisions on what we've heard today with what's in the report as well. Thank you.
Councillor Glassford?
Yeah, thank you. It's been very informative, but so if we did pass a TPO, the residents in there could cut it down, couldn't they? But the only other thing is, I would not call these 4 trees beautiful. That's all. Just been called.
Thank you. Just a bit of a summary as much as anything from myself. I mean, obviously we're here today to look at this tree preservation application for the or to confirm the application for the tree preservation order, following obviously the objections that we received from residents. We did actually go and visit the site, as was mentioned earlier this week, and certainly we're aware of. It was certainly a particularly windy day when we were down there, and there was obviously a lot of wind there. There was no evidence, as was mentioned by our officer, of heave at the base of the trees. I think obviously we've got to take into account all the evidence we've had, both from the speakers today and from the considerable amount of correspondence that we've received beforehand. I think from my own point of view, from what we saw on site, there's no doubt that these trees are extremely prominent in the street scene. I mean, they're right on the edge of the highway, and they are very substantial. They also, as was mentioned, I think by other speakers, there is the one tree that's already had its TPO put in place, which is slightly further down the road, and a number of other much smaller trees that will obviously be maintained by the Highway Department and pollarded right on the edge of the carriageway. But in terms of substantial trees, it is really the group of 4 and the one other big tree that is there. In the things that we have to take into account, the visibility, as I say, is extremely prominent. As individual trees, they're not great specimens, but they form a group, and that's obviously the impact they have is as that group. The reason we're considering this is obviously because the application before us, partly because there was potential, as we've heard today, that they could be under threat, and because of the uncertain ownership. And in terms of benefits, yeah, I think we've heard that they do cause a lot of benefit for some residents in terms of the general feel of the trees in the area, the environmental benefits, the ecological benefits, but like all trees, they have the downside as well, and we've heard that as well from the other residents in terms of the leaf litter, the slippy surfaces, the sticky sap, and so there is very much a balanced case as far as I can see on these. I think my own view is probably that I would go along with the recommendation to confirm the TPO, because in my view that doesn't stop us finding a community solution to this, and I hope in some respects it might aid having a focal point that actually people can try and deal with this, because I think it is no doubt that those trees do need maintenance, and we need to find a way of achieving that. Whilst, as I say, it's not in our remit as this panel to commit the council to finding that, I would certainly hope that our officers, as they said, and our members who are present here will take a leading role in trying to find a way forward with the community, because it sounds to me that whilst there are some members of the community who would like to see them gone, I think there is a feeling that if they were managed better, they might be able to work with them, and I think that's the big problem, is just that they are unmanaged. So I hope that would find us a way forward. So as I say, at the moment I'm minded to go with the recommendation, to make sure that doesn't result though in the concern that residents have had in their letters, particularly, which is once you serve TPO you can't do anything to the trees, and I think we need to make sure that's not the case, and that something does move forward on this. So as I say, that will be my feeling as things move forward. I don't know whether there's anything that Mrs. Lehman you want to add at this point before we move towards a vote. Anything else that my colleagues want to comment on? No? In which case, I will ask then if we have a proposition to move this forward. Is there a recommendation from members as to what we should do as to whether to confirm this notice or not? Councillor Grimes?
After listening to it all, I will move the recommendation and hope that we can get a satisfactory outcome out of all this.
So just confirm that's the recommendation to serve the
TPO.
to keep the TPO in place?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If that's, I'll second that. We then need to vote on that. So those members in favour that we do confirm the TPO, please show. Okay. Any members against? Okay, then that is carried with 2 to 1. So we confirm that the notice is served, that the TPO remains in place on those on that group of trees. Thank you very much, members. Can I thank all the members of the public and our officers for coming along today. I'm sure this is not the end of the story in this particular situation, and I hope that we can work together to get a successful solution to this area. I do believe that there is a way forward. We just need to make sure we can find that and take it forward, and look forward to working with ward members and officers to see that we resolve this. But thank you all very much for coming along today.